Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tales, where secrets slip, lies unravel, and the truth always has a twist. Real stories, raw confessions, and shocking betrayals. Drop a comment if you've ever caught a red flag too late. Now let's get into today's tale. My parents grabbed my hair while I was crying in the dressing room after getting fat-shamed at my first fashion show. "You're embarrassing us," they hissed. "Look at you, wobbling like a cow." I quit modeling until a stranger sent me a DM that changed my life. Let me rewind because I know how this sounds. And believe me, I didn't see it coming either. I'm Clara, 44 years old, mom of two. I run an online home decor store out of our home in New Hope, Pennsylvania, a picturesque town that looks like it belongs on a postcard. I've lived here nearly my whole life, married for 19 years to Victor, who worked in commercial real estate. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. More importantly, we were stable. Or so I thought. My younger sister Mira had always been a bit of a wild card, the kind of person who lived fast, spent faster, and always managed to land on her feet. That is, until she didn't. She had just gone through a messy breakup with some guy named Darren. She never gave me all the details, just said he was controlling, and it ended badly. She was broke, emotionally drained, and said she needed a place to reset. Of course I said yes. She was my sister. What else would I do? Lionel wasn't thrilled. He didn't say much at first, but I could tell from the way his mouth tightened when I brought it up just for a few weeks. I told him she just needs to get back on her feet at first. It was fine. Better than fine. Actually, Mira helped out around the house, made the kids laugh, even offered to redesign my website. We hadn't spent that much time together since college. It felt good, familiar, but then something changed. I couldn't pinpoint it at first. Lionel started working. Later, Mira seemed oddly cheerful whenever he was around. Their interactions felt loaded, like an inside joke. I didn't know the punchline too. And I noticed little things. His cologne in the downstairs bathroom. She used a wine glass on the back porch. When I hadn't been out there, once I found one of her earrings behind the couch cushions. She shrugged it off, said it probably fell while she was vacuuming. Still, the seed was planted. It tried to shake it. I felt crazy even thinking about it. Mira was my sister. Victor was my husband. We had children. We had history. We were the family she came to. When her life fell apart. Then one night, Lionel said he had to go to a client dinner. Mira said she was meeting an old art school friend in Philadelphia, but she left wearing red lipstick. Mira never wore red lipstick unless she was going somewhere. She really wanted to be seen. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was finally acknowledging what I'd been too scared to admit. I hired a babysitter, got in my car, and followed them. They met at a Holiday Inn Express off-route 1. She waited in the car for him. I watched as he pulled up, parked, and kissed her before they walked in together. My first thought wasn't anger. It was numb, like my mind couldn't compute what my eyes were seeing. I didn't confront them that night. I didn't storm in and make a scene. Instead, I drove back home, tucked the kids in, and lay awake until morning, staring at the ceiling over the next 2 weeks. I collected evidence, emails, texts, bank statements. Victor had transferred over $4 €0 to Mira in business expenses. I found hotel charges, billed TOA credit card I didn't even know he had. I took photo screenshots, backups. I went to a lawyer quietly. I also transferred the deed of our house into a trust under our children's names. Victor didn't notice. He never paid attention to the admin side of things. That was always my realm. Funny how useful that became. I planned everything and I waited. Thanksgiving was coming. I decided that would be the day. Not because I wanted to ruin it, but because it was the one day I could guarantee they'd both be there, surrounded by people who thought they knew us. Thanksgiving morning, I cooked like normal, turkey stuffing the works. Lionel complimented the smell of the rosemary gravy. Mira laughed too loudly at something Amira said. Everything was normal until it wasn't after dinner, as everyone was still at the table nursing their drinks and desserts. I stood up and clink-dicked my wine glass. "I'd like to make a toast," I said. Everyone turned. I'm thankful. This year, I began keeping my voice steady for my children, for health, and finally seeing things clearly. I glanced at Lionel, then at Mira. I'm especially thankful I no longer ignore my gut, that I've learned people show you who they are. Eventually, even if you really, really don't want to see it. Mira smile. Lionel shifted in his seat. I used to believe betrayal came from the outside, but now I know it often lives under your roof, sleep next to you, sit at your dinner table. I walked over to the television, plugged in a USB drive, hit play a series of screenshots began to display text messages, photos, receipts, hotel footage. There was silence. Lionel stood up abruptly. Clara turned that off. No, I said. Without turning around, you don't get to silence me. Mira's face was pale. She didn't speak. My in-laws excused themselves in a rush. A neighbor awkwardly offered to help with the dishes. No one made eye contact later that night when it was just the three of us. Lionel and Mira tried to explain, apologize, rationalize. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. Just handed Lionel an envelope. Inside were the divorce papers I already filed. You'll be hearing from my attorney on Monday. He opened his mouth to say something. I cut him off. I also took you off the deed. The house now belongs to the kids. If you try to fight me on it, we can bring all of this into court to Mira. I simply said you need to leave tonight. She tried to argue, where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. I don't remember what else was said. I just remember the sound of the door closing behind her, the night Mira left it. Rainedy. Remember that detail because she stood outside the house for a few minutes, suitcase in one hand, coat barely covering her, glancing back at the front. Door, like it might open again. I didn't move. I just watched from the upstairs hallway window. I didn't feel victorious, just emptied. Victor didn't leave that night. He stayed in the guest room, or what had been the office before Mira started using it, for her design work. He didn't speak to me. I didn't speak to him. The silence between us wasn't cold. It was hollow, like the aftermath of an earthquake, when the rumbling stops, and you're left with dust and debris, trying to figure out what's still. Standing, Liana and Daniel were at a friend's house for a sleepover, which had been arranged long before I ever decided Thanksgiving would be D-Day. I was grateful I needed time to sit in the wreckage alone the next morning. Imedi coffee poured a cup. For myself, didn't bother with him, I think that was. The moment Victor realized the gears were already turning and there was no fixing this. He came into the kitchen, his eyes were bloodshot, face puffy like he'd been crying all night. She meant nothing. Ro, he said. I didn't respond. She was just easy, you and I. We've been distant, you've been different, you've been so focused on the business, the house, the kids. I felt like I didn't matter anymore. I took a sip of my coffee. So, you slept with my sister. To matter again? He winced. It wasn't like that. I finally looked at him. You could have told me you felt neglected. You could have asked for therapy. You could have taken a solo vacation, but instead you chose the one person who knew exactly how much she meant to me and did the one thing you couldn't take back. He didn't try again after that. At least not that day. Over the next week, he packed up his things and moved into a rental apartment on the other side of town. He came by to see the kids supervised. At first, then briefly on his own. Liana didn't speak to him for 2 weeks. Daniel cried when he left the first time, then refused to talk about it. That part was the hardest, explaining it to them. I didn't give them every detail, obviously, but he told the truth in a way I thought they could understand. I told them that Daddy made a choice that hurt our family and that we were going to be okay. Not the same, but okay. Liana, wise beyond her 15 years, asked, was it Aunt Mira? I didn't lie. Yes. She didn't say anything, just stared at the floor. I hate them, she whispered. No, you don't, I said gently. You're hurt, you're allowed to be, but hate, that's too heavy to carry for long. She didn't respond, but I saw her shoulders relax just slightly. Daniel, being younger, struggled more. He missed the way things used to be. He asked when Daddy was coming back if I could forgive him. If we could just pretend like it didn't happen. That gutted me more than anything. The realization that children will trade anything, even their self-worth, for a return to normal. But I stayed the course. I kept their routines, made breakfast, drive them to school, worked on orders in the garage. Turned studio. I focused on one day at a time. Mira tried to call. Once I didn't answer. She sent a message saying she was sorry that she didn't mean to fall in love with Lionel, that she thought he was going to leave me anyway. I deleted the message. She mailed a letter next. It sat unopened on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I dropped it in the shredder. Closure I had decided was a luxury. I didn't owe her. My parents would have been heartbroken. That part hit me. Unexpectedly, one night as I was organizing old photo albums, there was one picture of us, me and Moraine, matching Easter dresses, our mom behind us trying to keep us both still. I stared at it for a long time, not sad, not angry, just wondering how it all became. This, people say, betrayal cuts deep, but it's not the sharpness that hurts. It's the slow bleed afterward. The hardest moments were the quiet ones, folding laundry and finding one of Victor's old t-shirts mixed in, running into people in town who didn't know yet and asking, "How's Lionel? And your sister, is she still staying with you?" Ordering Chinese food and realizing we used to always fight over the last spring roll. Little ghosts everywhere. But I didn't fall apart. I couldn't afford to. My kids needed me to be steady. So I became steady. I also became ruthless. I made sure the divorce settlement left Victor with the bare minimum, not out of spite, but out of precision. I had built my business from scratch, the household raised the children, and weathered every storm quietly for nearly 2 decades. I wasn't walking away with less, and I didn't. Mira's freelance work dried up after her little scandal reached her primary client, who happened to be friends with someone in my social circle. Word travels fast in towns like ours, especially when the betrayal is this personal. She moved to a smaller apartment in a neighboring county. Last I heard, she was bartending at a place off the highway. Sometimes I wonder if she regrets it, but then I remind myself it's not my job to carry that. There's something oddly grounding about starting over in your 40s at first. The silence in the house felt suffocating. You don't realize how much of your day is filled by someone else's presence. Their keys on the counter, the sound of their footsteps coming down the stairs, the rhythm of their breath. When they sleep next to you. Victor was no longer there, and the void was loud. But then the silence started feeling like space, and space became peace. I rearranged the living room, moved the couch we bought as a couple to the basement, replaced it with a secondhand sectional I found online, and reupholstered myself. It wasn't just furniture, it was a declaration. This is my house now, my choices, no more compromise to keep things. Even evening rituals became sacred after the kids went to bed. I'd pour a glass of wine, light a candle, and sit by the window with a book, or just watch the wind rattle the leaves. Sometimes I let the silence stretch out for hours. I wasn't lonely. I was resting from years of walking on eggshells. I didn't even realize I'd laid out for myself. The business kept me busy, and for the first time in a long time, I was grateful for that. Orders picked up, especially around the holidays. I leaned into the chaos of December: bows, bubble wrap, customer emails, scheduling UPS pickups when you're moving. That fast pain has fewer places to stick. Still, there were landmines at a school fundraiser in early December. I ran into Cheryl Dosta, one of those women who always speaks in a whisper, like she's collecting secrets, even when she's just asking about the weather. She put a gentle hand on my forearm and said, "We were all so shocked about you and Lionel. He always spoke so highly of you at the PTO meetings." He gave her a polite smile. He speaks highly of a lot of women, apparently. She blinked, her lips parted, but no words came out. I excused myself and walked away before she could say anything else. My kids were adjusting in their own ways. Liana threw herself into her studies. She started tutoring younger students and joined the yearbook committee. I could tell she was angry not just at Lionel, but at how drastically her idea of adulthood had shifted. I didn't push her to talk. I let her come to me. When she was ready, it was a Thursday evening, a few weeks before winter break. When she finally did, I was grading some sample fabric swatches on the kitchen counter when she sat across from me and said, "Did you ever see it coming?" I didn't pretend not to know what she meant. "No," I said, "not until it was too late." She nodded slowly. "I think that's what scares me, that you can think someone loves you and still miss everything." I put the fabric down and leaned forward. Love doesn't always come with honesty, and sometimes people aren't lying to hurt you. They're lying because they're too weak to do the hard thing. Like leaving, she said. Exactly. She stared at the counter for a moment, then quietly said, "I don't know if I'll ever forgive him. You don't have to." I told her, "But don't let that be the thing that hardens. You're allowed to be cautious, just don't build a wall so tall that no one else can ever get through." She didn't respond. But she sat there with me for a while. That was enough. Daniel was different. He was younger, more sensitive. He asked questions. In pieces like his, men couldn't hold the whole truth all at once. "Do you think Daddy still loves us? Will we ever all live together again? Does Aunt Mira get to come to Christmas?" That last one threw me. I paused before answering, "No, sweetie, Aunt Mira won't be coming." But what if she says sorry? "Some mistakes are too big for a sorry to fix," I said softly. "And part of growing up is learning which people keep you safe and which ones don't." He seemed to accept that. But every now and then, I caught him drawing. Pictures of our old house with all of us inside. Those were the cracks that hurt the most. The ones that didn't bleed just stung when you breathed too deeply. As for Lionel, his attempts at amends were sporadic at best. He texted a few times, called once on Christmas Eve, and left a voicemail. Something about missing what we had and hoping we could talk in the new year. I didn't respond. It wasn't about holding a grudge. It was about not holding him anymore. Every time I considered replying, I remembered the look on his face when I showed the hotel footage. He wasn't ashamed, he was inconvenienced, he wasn't sorry. He was caught one night in January, a mutual acquaintance. Caleb Lambert, who used top-lay golf with Lionel, ran into me at the post office. He asked how I was doing. He gave the standard answer, busy but good. Then he said something that stuck with me. You know, Lionel's been real quiet lately, told me he's thinking of quitting real estate, said he's tired all the time. I raised an eyebrow. Tired from what? Caleb laughed awkwardly. I didn't ask. I didn't laugh. I just nodded and left because here's the thing. I was tired of pretending, tired of compromising, tired of holding everything together while other people made a mess. But now, for the first time in decades, I was choosing where my energy went. I wasn't healing for Lionel or Mira or the town full of whisperers who didn't know the half of it. It was healing for me, and that was just beginning. Winter turned to spring, like it always does. Even when you feel like your own life is frozen in, placed the trees and new hope started to bloom again. Those soft pink buds along Main Street, the kind that tourists love taking pictures under, and just like clockwork, the same local events rolled around: the annual art walk, the riverboat openings, the little antique market on Saturdays that took over the canal path, and for the first time in over a decade, I went alone. There was something strangely liberating about walking through those old familiar places as a different version of myself. I wasn't Victor's wife anymore. I wasn't the woman bringing her sister along for an afternoon out. I wasn't even the woman pretending everything was fine. I was just me. Clara, 44, divorced, rebuilding and not apologizing for any of it, of course. People still stared sometimes. It wasn't mean. Not exactly just that uncomfortable pause in conversation when I entered a room, the whispered half smile from someone who didn't know whether to say hello or pretend not to see me. Small towns are like that. People rarely say what they're thinking. They just hope you'll read their silence correctly. What they didn't know was that I had stopped caring. Wasn't bitter, I just had no space left for small talk and shallow sympathy. I was too busy with the kids, with work, with figuring out how to sleep through the night without waking up halfway in the dark, with memories pressing down on my chest. It didn't always work. Some nights I still dreamed about Mira, not the betrayal, not even the motel parking lot or the arguments, but the Mira I used to know, the one who curled up on my dorm room floor with a bottle of cheap wine and cried about failing her art history midterm, the one who held my hand when our mom died, the one who made Liana laugh so hard she snorted chocolate milk out of her nose. Grief isn't always about losing good people. Sometimes it's about losing the version of them you believed in, and grief like that, it doesn't come with a funeral. One morning in early April, I found an envelope in the mailbox, no return address. But I recognized the handwriting instantly. Mira, I stood there right in the driveway and stared at it for a long time. I could have tossed it into the recycling bin like I did last time. But something, maybe curiosity, maybe closure, made me open it. It wasn't long, just 3 pages handwritten. She said she was sorry again. But this time it felt different. Not just sorry for what happened, but sorry for who she'd been. She admitted to knowing it was wrong from the beginning. Said she mistook Lionel's attention for something it wasn't. Said she envied me, not the life, but the steadiness, the fact that I had a family, a purpose, a center. She never seemed to find. She said she wasn't asking for forgiveness, only understanding. She ended it with, "I hope you're okay, I really do. And I hope one day when it doesn't hurt so much, you'll remember the parts of us that were good." Before all this, I read it once, then again, then folded it and put it in the back of the kitchen drawer where I keep the takeout menus, and expired. Coupons not as a keepsake, just somewhere out of sight. I didn't cry, but I did feel something. Not closure, not warmth, just a soft tired ache, like a scar that still tugs when it rains. In May, I ran into Lionel at the grocery store. He looked older, not drastically, just worn, like the sharpness he always carried had dulled. He reached for the same box of granola bars I was eyeing and stopped when he saw me. "Row," he said, almost like a reflex. I nodded once. "Victor." We stood there in silence for a second too long. "You look well," he said. "I am," I replied. He looked like he wanted to say more. Maybe something sincere, maybe something performative. I didn't wait to find out. I walked away without another word. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel triumphant either. Just done. And there's a strange kind of peace in being done, not just with someone, but with the part of you that held on. The part that wanted explanations. Apologies, acknowledgments I didn't need. Any of it anymore. Later that week, Liana asked if we could take a weekend trip, just the two of us, just get out of town for a bit. She said somewhere with old bookstores and bad coffee. We ended up in Cape May, rented a tiny cottage by the water, walked along the boardwalk in sweaters, laughed over greasy fish and chips. We didn't talk about Leonol or Mira or what we had lost. We just were present and still and whole. In that moment, at one point, she looked at me and said, "You seem different, lighter." I smiled. "I think I am." And I meant it, because healing isn't loud. It doesn't always come with epiphes or fireworks or some dramatic turning point. Sometimes it's just a quiet weekend with your daughter, an empty drawer where your ex's things used to be, a mailbox without a new apology letter, a dinner where the only thing you're focused on is the taste of the sauce, not who's missing from that bowl. And slowly, without even realizing it, you start building something new, something honest, something. Your summer arrived in New Hope with the usual mix of humidity, tourists, and street festivals. It was the first time I truly felt like myself again. Not the shattered version trying to hold things together. Not the performative hostess playing the role of the content wife. Just me, Clara, single mom, business owner, survivor by now. The divorce had been finalized for 6 months. The house was officially under my children's trust, and the monthly payments Victor owed were being deducted automatically. He never contested a thing. I think he knew better. Mira had all but vanished. No calls, no texts, no letters. Someone told me she was working part-time at an event space 2 towns over, doing graphic design and bartending on weekends. I didn't care to confirm it. I didn't want updates. I wanted distance, but karma doesn't need help finding people. It always catches up, and it did in the most poetic, quiet, satisfying way imaginable. In September, a woman named Sabrina emailed me through my website's contact form. At first, I thought it was a customer inquiry, but it wasn't. "Hi, Clara. I hope this isn't an overstep. I recently started dating a man named Victor Malakand. I found your name while Googling him. I know this might seem invasive, but I've noticed some things that didn't sit right and wanted to understand a bit more about his past. He mentioned he was divorced, but said it was mutual and amicable. I'm writing because I've started seeing signs that make me doubt that story, and I don't want to walk into something blindly. If you're willing to share anything at all, I'd be deeply grateful. Warmly, Sabrina P." I sat there for a moment, rereading the email. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I thought about who I wanted to be. I could have ranted, could have dumped everything in a flood of rage. But then I remembered the power of precision, how it cuts deeper than chaos. So I replied, "Hi, Sabrina. Thank you for reaching out. I won't speak poorly of my ex, because I believe people reveal who they are in time. No matter what anyone says, but I'll tell you this. Lionel had a long history of making selfish decisions and then calling them mutual. If you're already noticing red flags, trust them. You're not crazy. You're early. Take care of yourself. Clara 2. Weeks later, I received another email. "You were right. I ended things. Thank you. I hope you know how powerful you are." G smiled, not out of malice, but out of peace. You see, revenge doesn't always look like some grand dramatic gesture. Sometimes it's a whisper, a subtle hand, guiding someone else away from the same cliff you were pushed off. Sometimes it's watching your ex become the architect of his own loneliness, one lie at a time. But the best revenge, it was still to come. Late that fall, I was invited to be one of the featured vendors at a regional artisan expo. It was being held at a renovated Mail, a 2-day event with panels, booths, even keynote speakers. I accepted. My business had grown so much over the past year, I needed the exposure. I have 3 part-time employees. Now I was working with a local woodshop for custom pieces. I just landed a small feature in a regional design magazine. My booth was between a boutique pottery studio and a candle maker. I brought my best-selling wall art, some new farmhouse-style signage, and a portfolio of my home staging work on the second day I saw. Mira, hair shorter, now dyed a dull copper. She looked thinner or maybe just more tired. She was working the bar in the events lounge area pouring wine. 4 vendors and VIP guests. She saw me too for a moment, our eyes locked. Just like that. Thanksgiving night. She looked down first. I didn't approach her, didn't say a word. I just smiled politely when I passed her, like I would any stranger offering me a drink. Later that afternoon, I gave a short talk on turning trauma into creative inspiration. I didn't name names, I didn't need to, but I talked about rebuilding after betrayal, about how sometimes losing people is the most honest thing they ever do. For you, about how silence, when used wisely, can be the most devastating. Response of all people came up to me after some, with tears in their eyes, saying they saw themselves in every word, that they felt less alone. Now, Mira didn't come over, but she was there in the back half listening behind the bar, and that was enough. That was the revenge living so fully, so clearly that her shame filled the silence I left behind. And Lionel, well, I heard through the grapevine that he moved in with a new woman. In Doytown, someone younger with no kids. No history. I also heard he lost a few clients after being late on deadlines and mixing business with his personal drama one too many times. But I didn't verify any of that. I had no need to, because my life wasn't about him anymore. It was about Saturday mornings at the farmer's market with my kids, movie nights on the couch, the rush of shipping out 50 orders in one weekend, the quiet thrill of waking up in a bed I chose, in a house that felt safe, in a life that was mine. A few months later, I matched with someone on a dating app. His name was Elias. He was a widower, landscape architect, with a dry sense of humor and the kindest eyes I'd ever seen. We met for coffee, then dinner, then a walk along the canal. But that's another story. All I'll say for now is healing didn't mean erasing what happened. It meant carrying it without letting it weigh me down. It meant forgiving myself for not seeing it sooner and letting their betrayal be the fire I forged my new life in. And when people ask me how I got revenge, I tell them the truth. I didn't destroy them, I outgrew them.